I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Last week, Biden's ATF Director nominee Steven Dettelbach testified before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator Mike Lee asked Dettelbach if he would disavow Everytown for fundraising off of the Texas school shooting just hours after the tragedy occurred. Although Dettelbach refused to disavow the organization that is endorsing him, he reaffirmed that he believes politics have absolutely no place in law enforcement. Here's the full exchange.
Mr. Dettelbach, let's start with you. Every time one of these tragedies occurs, I think we for far too long just failed to look back at the root causes of rampage violence. Questions involving things like why is our culture suddenly producing so many young men who want to murder innocent people? Raises questions like, could things like fatherlessness, the breakdown of families, isolation from civil society, or the glorification of violence be contributing factors? Instead, the left, once again, is calling for more gun control. They want to crack down on law-abiding Americans and federal firearms licensees who want to follow the law instead of armed criminals. For example, as I recall, Mr. Dettelbach, you've called for every type of gun control, and under your leadership as U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Ohio, the number of prosecutions of firearms and explosives cases filed by the office actually decreased by almost half, from 123 cases filed in 2008 to only 65 cases filed in 2016. Now, there may well be reasons for that. I'm not familiar with all the operations of the office at the time, but I think it's worth inquiring into. But what's even more outrageous, though, is that gun groups like the Brady Campaign and Everytown have wasted no time in attempting to profit off of this horrific tragedy in Uvalde, Texas. Everytown's fundraising email attempts to play on the emotions of those whose lives have been ripped apart by this tragic shooting is troubling. Their email says, quote, "This crisis will only end if we band together and demand action from our lawmakers. I need you in this fight." And at the end of the letter is a large red button that says contribute to end gun violence. Now, Mr. Dettelbach, you're endorsed by Everytown. Is that right?
I believe so, Senator.
And are you willing to disavow their shameless immediate fundraising off of the Texas tragedy just hours after this tragedy occurred?
Senator, as I said, and I want to repeat and promise you, as ATF Director, politics have absolutely no place in law enforcement. They have no place in an ATF Director, and I don't view this as a Democrat or Republican issue. I view it as an opportunity to try to work together to make things better.
I appreciate that, and that's as it should be. Do you disavow these efforts?
Senator, I haven't seen what you're referring to, and it's not for me to get involved in a political argument. I am going to be a law enforcement person again, as I've done for 20 years, if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed. And I vow I would never be involved in any political aspect of that kind of thing while I'm ATF Director.
No, I appreciate that, and that's as it should be. I do think it's unfortunate that they're doing this literally hours after the shooting, and I don't think that's too difficult to disavow, but apparently you're not inclined to do that. And do you support the Biden administration's zero-tolerance policy for federal firearms licensees?
Senator, I was not at the ATF when those policies were developed, and I've not had a chance to speak with the people at the ATF about all the things behind them. I can tell you, I represent now, and I'm in private practice, I represent businesses who deal with regulators. And to me, the three key things of good regulation is it has to be, number one, it has to be fair. Right? Number two, it has to be consistent. And number three, it has to be effective. And when, in my experience representing clients, when you can't do those things, it creates an uncertain business atmosphere for people who are trying to follow the law. And I would tell you, as an ATF director, that would be very important to me, is to find out how we can be, and you can do those things at the same time. It's not always easy, but you can, because it's important for people who have Second Amendment rights and who are business people.
Right. Now, to that end, do you believe that federal firearms licensees should have their licenses revoked for simple paperwork errors on Form 4473, or for missing outreach from ATF for a tracing request?
Senator, to me, again, I would have to look at any individual case, but I will tell you, Senator, people have to know that if they have a minor violation, it's going to be treated one way, and people have to know if it's more significant, it's going to be treated another. Every time, not depending on whether it's in Seattle or Miami or what month it is. And I would tell you, Senator, that would be very important to me to do that. And I think the lawyers then argue about what happened, right? This was intentional, no, it wasn't intentional. That's where I think we can have discussions as a regulator in a regulated industry. But people should understand and have some predictability they're entitled to, is when you do this, this is what happens.
Yeah, and my time's expired. I would like you to answer that question, though, because it's a simple one. And I appreciate your willingness to say there should be clarity. I completely agree. I would like to know, though, whether a federally licensed firearms dealer should lose his or her license, based on simple paperwork errors in Form 4473.
Again, Senator, to me, it depends on each case is different. So, for instance, you say errors. I assume by that you mean something that's totally unintentional.
Yes.
Right. So unintentional violations are much less serious than intentional violations to me.
So on that basis, they should not lose their license?
Yes, I guess if it's happened 70 times over a period of years, I'm just making that up as an example. You look at the whole circumstance, but you should treat different cases differently.
In other words, absent aggravating factors or recidivist?
Or mitigating factors. And the lawyers argue about that, obviously, Senator.
Gotcha. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Leahy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.